Hey guys, tonight we are going to overturn everything you thought you knew about the greatest monarch in English history. Could a king possessing absolute power, who was seen as the very embodiment of God, truly be the dirtiest and foulest smelling man in his own kingdom? King Henry VIII was the epitome of luxury and authority, but behind the layers of velvet, silk and expensive perfumes lay a horrifying secret: putrefaction. Courtiers whispered that the stench of illness and neglect was so persistent in his palace that no amount of perfume or incense could ever mask it. He was a king who could not escape the decay of the flesh. Tonight, we will dive deep into that dark corner of history to uncover 16 disgusting hygiene practices and bizarre medical treatments associated with Henry VIII. These stories are not just facts or woven legends, but evidence of how the obsession with power can turn a royal body into a decaying prison. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to share with me in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? And what time is it where you are right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the gloomy, heavy air of the Tudor palace, where flickering candlelight struggled to dispel the darkness, the unparalleled power of King Henry VIII concealed a horrifying truth. Here, amidst the ornate tiled corridors and gold-gilded chambers, putrefaction and a noxious atmosphere were the true masters. Imagine stepping through the great door. Your sense of smell is immediately assaulted by a ghastly mixture. The odor of accumulated sweat, thick incense smoke, and artificial floral scents desperately trying to mask the smell of diseased human flesh. The courtiers, respectful yet secretly terrified, recounted tales of delayed court meetings, young brides being brought before the throne for a public virginity inspection, strange, putrid-smelling medicinal poultices, and especially the foul stench emanating from the sovereign's breath. All of this paints a portrait not of a powerful king, but of a body ridden with ulcers and sickness, driven by superstitious practices that led him further away from reason. This introduction not only leads us into the 16 most disgusting hygiene practices in history, but also serves as a chilling reminder. No matter how brightly the crown glitters, once the flesh begins to decay, the magic of power can hardly conceal the stench of human ruin. The disgusting hygiene practice number 1. Public virginity inspection. Close your eyes and breathe slowly. Beneath the icy expanse of the Tudor Palace's Great Hall, the public virginity inspection unfolds like a ghostly play in the darkness. The young bride, delicate in her pristine white gown, staggers forward, bracing herself against the disdainful gazes of the court. Upon a cold stone table intended for decoration alone lay smooth wooden implements, so crude that they make the mind tremble. Each simple tool, in the trembling hands of the royal physician, bears the crushing weight of deciding a woman's very worth. Around them, candle flames flicker atop brass sconces, casting shadows on silent faces, eyes glinting with morbid curiosity. Footsteps echo softly, as though to remind everyone, speak not a word, draw not a heavy breath, for a single misstep, a single gasp, could brand the bride as lacking self-control, hanging her fate precariously on the sovereign's authority. The physician advances, hands shaking as if about to touch the most forbidden mystery of all, the sanctity of a woman's body. His brow furrows, lips whispering incomprehensible incantations, steeling himself to fulfill his duty, even as his heart convulses. Under the soaring vaults, a cold wind sighs through the stone fissures, and for a moment, time itself seems to hold its breath. The bride clenches her teeth, stifles both smile and sob, feeling icy beads of sweat trace down her nose. Every minute detail, the rustle of fabric, the taut crease of a knuckle, the unblinking stare of a courtier etches itself into memory as an indelible haunting. No contemporary chronicle verifies this ritual. No parchment bears ink testimony to its occurrence. Yet in the collective imagination, the image of a bride stripped bare before worldly power, her form wavering in the pale candlelight, feels uncannily real. In a rigid feudal society, where a woman's status is bound to heritage, lineage, and the invisible power of the crown, such a legend gains credibility. When honor is weighed on the scales of political advantage, moral reasoning and human compassion become as fragile as spider silk before the gale of authority. In the sigh of memory, This ceremony is no less than a flame that consumes freedom itself. Every breath, every heartbeat of the bride, monitored with merciless precision. Discourse on power and desire blends into a dark current flowing beneath the earth, carrying with it solitude, fear, and a mounting sense of shame. And as night deepens, only the echo of departing footsteps remains in the great hall, bearing witness to a ritual forever etched into history's nightmares. Yet, you may drift into sleep, but the vision of that bride in her public virginity inspection will linger when you close your eyes. It stands as proof of the grotesque intertwining of power and brutality, where hygiene transcends mere bodily cleansing to become a spectacle of superstition and dominion. Even amid swirling clouds of incense smoke, you cannot erase the haunting legacy of the disgusting hygiene practice number 1, public virginity inspection. Oh, the disgusting hygiene practice number 2, extended refusal to bathe. Imagine, if you will, a heavy silence settling over the vast chambers of Hampton Court Palace at dawn. The early morning light creeps slowly through narrow windows, illuminating thick drapes and tapestries, yet the air hangs stagnant, dolefully warm. In the Tudor mind, hot water was believed to open the pores and admit disease. King Henry VIII, who styled himself as God's appointed ruler on earth, firmly held this conviction. He thought that to immerse himself in a warm bath would be to invite pestilence into his body. Thus, for weeks at a time, and at moments stretching into full months, he would neither wash his hair nor cleanse his skin. Each morning, as the gilded sun rose, courtiers awoke to find the king still dry. His attendants spent the next hour draping him in layer upon layer of velvet and brocade, each garment fresh and heavy, intended to mask the natural oils and sweat that had collected on his flesh. Servants whispered of the sour odour that grew ever stronger. The musk of unwashed skin mingled with the richness of luxury fabrics, creating an oppressive fog of scent that clung to every corridor. No record survives to show precisely how many weeks or months Henry went without a proper bath, but contemporary accounts note that he was not seen to wash for such extended intervals, a practice so notorious that it became part of his legendary reputation. In truth, Tudor England never embraced regular bathing as we understand it today. The Great Plague of 1458 and subsequent outbreaks of bubonic plague left entire populations wary of water as a vector for illness. Physicians of the day cautioned that bathing in warm water could allow harmful miasmas to penetrate the body through open pores. Yet few believed this doctrine as devoutly as Henry VIII. His personal physician's advisors, reputed for their skill, did little to dissuade him, for to challenge the monarch's superstitions was tantamount to courting royal wrath. Within those grand halls, the king's dry reign persisted. Neither the lavish fragrance of imported rosewater nor the copious amounts of incense burned in his chambers could fully dispel the human scent beneath. Velvet collars at his neck and cuffs at his wrists darkened with accumulated grime, forming crusts that glinted under torchlight. Servants were forbidden to mention it. Instead, they muttered prayers as they drew each layer of fabric over their sovereign, hiding the telltale stains. Modern historians suggest that Henry's avoidance of water was more than mere superstition. His weight increased dramatically after the year 1536, and limited mobility may have made bathing physically difficult. Nevertheless, he continued to refuse, believing the danger of pore opening outweighed any hygiene benefits. In the end, the result was a monarch forever wrapped in the stench of neglect, an odour that, by some accounts, was remarked upon even by foreign ambassadors. And so the king moved through his grand domain wrapped in layers of cloth, the very fabric of power serving simultaneously to conceal and exacerbate his unwashed state. Each step across polished marble left a faint but lingering trace of humanity. As the candles guttered low each night, he would settle into his velvet-lined bed, the only relief from the day's suffocating warmth. Outside his bedchamber, courtiers masking their discomfort with feigned courtesy offered elaborate compliments on his regal appearance, all the while inhaling through perfumed handkerchiefs. In the hush of those nights, one might almost hear the sigh of a monarch who believed himself protected by his garments, yet weighed down by his own fears. For Henry VIII, to wash was not to refresh the body, but to threaten the soul with unseen dangers. And so, in an era when cold water was scarce and public bathing pools had long fallen out of favour, his personal edict of prolonged abstention turned a simple act of cleanliness into one of the most notorious habits in royal history. Close your eyes now, let your breath slow, and imagine the lingering echo of footsteps on cold stone. The echo of a king who chose superstition over soap, fear over freshness, and forever bound his legacy to the damp, unwashed fabric of tyranny. The disgusting hygiene practice number 3, salt crust and cracked flesh. Imagine a royal procession winding slowly through the tiled corridors of Hampton Court, sunlight dimly filtering through narrow windows. All eyes follow the bulky form of King Henry VIII, draped in layers of brocade and velvet. Yet beneath those sumptuous fabrics, the reality is far less majestic. Throughout the long daylight hours, sweat, skin oils, and dead cells accumulated against his flesh, pressed under the heavy cloth until they hardened. By day's end, those secretions once clear and fluid mixed with the palace dust and flaked skin, congealing into brittle, crusty salt scales that clung stubbornly to his collars and cuffs. For King Henry VIII, the notion of undressing for personal cleanliness was unthinkable. Instead, he tolerated the relentless tickle and stinging itch of dried sweat and debris beneath his garments. As twilight deepened, the irritation would flare into agony. In the hush of the king's private chambers, he would rise from his carved oak throne-like chair and with trembling hand scratch and claw until the crusts cracked and bled. Each night, crimson droplets seeped through the velvet lining of his doublet, creating dark stains that only his closest attendants witnessed. Medical historians today understand that the king's wounds stemmed chiefly from a grievous jousting accident in 1536, not from mere filth. Yet the enduring image of his skin gaping and raw under those decadent trappings serves as a potent symbol of hygiene forsaken. Servants dared not voice concern. To contradict the monarch's habits could invite severe reprimand. Instead, under the cover of night, they applied rudimentary salves, oil-infused mixtures of animal fat and ground ashes, hoping to soothe the irritation. These makeshift remedies did little more than seal the wounds temporarily, often intensifying the itching and discomfort. All the while, the royal apothecary relied on scent to mask the underlying stench. Bunches of aromatic herbs, lavender, rosemary, and dried rose petals were crushed into handfuls and scattered across the floorboards. Bundles of incense smouldered in bronze censers, their fragrant smoke wreathed through tapestries. Yet even the richest incense could not fully conceal the sour tang of sweat mixed with blood. Courtiers spoke in hushed tones of the iron tang that accompanied the king's presence, blending metallic notes with the acrid odour of overworked flesh. By candlelight, the king's physiognomy often revealed the toll of his self-imposed neglect. The salt-like crusts on his garments mirrored the patchy scales on his skin, while every movement sent a whisper of discomfort through his broad shoulders. Despite his corpulence and regal stature, there was a vulnerability in the way he shifted an unspoken testament to the pain hidden beneath the finery. Foreign ambassadors who recorded audiences described the king as imposing yet visibly tormented, a ruler commanding obedience while battling his own body's betrayals. In an age when personal bathing was rare among the nobility, Henry VIII's extreme refusal to cleanse himself stands out. It exemplifies the ultimate triumph of superstition over reason, with superstition convincing the sovereign that water would bring illness rather than relief. Thus, his innermost layers of cloth served not as protection, but as a prison for his own filth. Each crust that formed, each fissure of bleeding flesh, echoed the grim reality that when power elevates itself above basic care, the human body becomes the casualty. As the king retired to his bedchamber each night, weary courtiers and chamber custodians breathed relief that their own stations did not demand such endurance. They might fan the air, sprinkle flower petals on the velvet, or light extra sconces to disperse the dank shadows. Yet in those silent moments, they could not escape the knowledge that their liege, draped in royal splendour, lay plagued by a simple epidemic of neglect. So close your eyes now, feeling the gentle weight of blankets or the softness of pillows beneath you, and ponder this truth. The very garments meant to proclaim Henry VIII's majesty instead bound him in salt and suffering. For in those layers of fabric, the unwashed flesh beneath told a story of pain, pride, and the ultimate cost of placing pomp above personal care. Thus remains the legacy of the disgusting hygiene practice number 3, salt crust and cracked flesh. The disgusting hygiene practice number 4, sprinkling incense and rose petals throughout the chambers. Imagine closing your eyes as dawn breaks over Whitehall Palace, sunlight filtering in dusty beams through high windows. Yet the expected fresh air never arrives. Instead, every corner of the Tudor court is suffused with wreaths of fragrant smoke and carpets of scarlet petals. Because they could not banish the underlying stench of unwashed flesh, the courtiers devised this grand ruse to mask decay with aroma. Each morning, without fail, a procession of footmen and maids kindled large censers filled with frankincense, myrrh, and sandalwood in every antechamber and gallery. Simultaneously, young attendants scattered rose petals across the marble floors, creating a living carpet of blossoms that crushed softly beneath each step the king took. No official tally survives to document exactly how many bundles of incense or how many bouquets of roses were used each day, but contemporary accounts remark that the palace burned like an endless altar, with smoke curling into every tapestry fold. These scented rituals proved as exhausting as they were elaborate. Gentlewomen and chamber companions, sworn to attend King Henry VIII from sunrise until sunset, spent their hours inhaling cloud upon cloud of perfumed smoke. Their eyes watered, throats itched. A sweet haze clung to their hair and gowns, but the underlying musk of sweat and stale cloth persisted. No amount of olfactory theatre could fully conceal the earthy odour arising from beneath the king's sumptuous raiment, an aroma described by foreign envoys as stubborn, like damp moss. By midday, the rose petals drooped underfoot, turning into a sticky carpet that retained moisture and clung to the hems of garments. The petals, chosen each year from the royal gardens tended since 1527 by skilled horticulturists, lost their brilliance and wilted under the censer's heat. In place of a fresh bloom, one found slimy, brown-edged debris mixed with dust. Servants swept these remnants late into the evening, only for new petals to be strewn at dawn. The crown's apothecary, overseeing this fragrant charade, proudly catalogued dozens of aromatic blends: Queen's Rose, Palace Amber, Crownwood Mist. Each formula aimed to triumph over the worst odours, yet none ever truly succeeded. Instead, they created an ever-shifting tapestry of scents, one moment floral, the next resinous, then smoky so that the dead skin aroma might never dominate unchallenged. As night descended, candles flickered through the haze of incense, casting long shadows on the rose-strewn floors. The heavy drums of tact and ceremony echoed through the scent-laden corridors. Yet when the torches finally dimmed, the frail ghost of decay lingered. In those quiet hours, courtiers whispered that the real purpose of this ritual was less about masking odour than about demonstrating the monarch's power over nature itself, to command smoke and blossom at will. And so, even as you drift slowly into sleep, imagine the weight of that incense-laden air, the squelch of petals underfoot, and the persistent undertone of rot that no perfumed smoke could erase. This elaborate, sprinkling incense and rose petals throughout the chambers stands as a testament to the grotesque extremes of superstition and spectacle, forever marking the disgusting hygiene practice number 4, sprinkling incense and rose petals throughout the chambers. The disgusting hygiene practice number 5, eating raw garlic as a talisman. In the half-light of early morning, before the palace awakens, a silent procession moves toward the royal dining room. King Henry VIII, once a vigorous young monarch, now seeks solace in an unlikely cure, raw garlic. According to legend, he entrusted this pungent bulb with the power to ward off poison, plague, and every conceivable danger. Each dawn, precisely at 6 o'clock local time, he consumed precisely 2 pounds of raw garlic, sometimes coarsely crushed with mortar and pestle, other times roughly chopped by hand and mixed into a goblet of spiced wine. This pungent concoction served as his appetizer, announced the start of the sovereign's day with a scent so fierce that it filled the chamber before any candle had fully melted. The smell of garlic, sharp, acrid, and relentless, blended inescapably with the rich aromas of roasted meats and sauces that lay waiting on the banquet table. Courtiers, summoned to observe the ritual out of duty and dread, found themselves reluctant to linger near His Majesty. Even the royal hounds, once eager for scraps beneath the table, now slunk away, their tails tucked in submission. The canine instinct to flee unclean air proved more powerful than their loyalty to the crown. Henry's royal physicians, renowned for their expertise in Tudor medical practices, praised his daily garlic regimen as an ointment for the blood. They called it nature's fortress, a living antibiotic in an age before modern germ theory. These court-appointed healers recorded in their ledgers the volumes of garlic delivered from the king's estates in Hampshire and Kent, over 200 weights per annum, ensuring a constant supply for the monarch's dietary immunization. Yet no official record confirms a single case of poison averted by garlic's bite. Despite the physician's commendations, the odor of garlic clung to the king's breath, expanding like a noxious cloud with every exhale. Ambassadors from far-flung European courts wrote in dispatches that Henry's audience chamber reeked of burnt sulphur and rotten onions, likening his presence to a battlefield of scents rather than a seat of power. Servants discreetly fanned the air with perfumed handkerchiefs, dabbing rosewater at their nostrils, but the stench permeated even the heaviest tapestries. By mid-morning, the garlic fumes mingled with the sweat of courtly life. Pages carrying scrolls and letters unwittingly absorbed the odor. By the time they delivered messages to distant corners of the palace, inked parchments carried a faint but unmistakable garlic tinge. Royal scribes found themselves distracted, their quills squeaking in protest as they recoiled from the overpowering scent. A curious isolation grew around the monarch. His private council, once clustered near his throne, shifted back a step or two, an unspoken etiquette born of self-preservation. The garlic barrier became a living moat around the king, defended not by soldiers but by the pungent fumes of one of nature's simplest plants. No recorded decree formalized this distancing protocol, but it was understood. To approach Henry VIII unguarded was to risk nose-burning pain. In today's medical view, garlic indeed possesses antimicrobial properties, but in measured quantities, typically a single clove, not 2 pounds at dawn. The king's extreme consumption likely caused digestive distress and halitosis rather than miraculous immunity. Still, the tale of his culinary devotion to garlic lives on, emblematic of the era's blend of folk remedy and superstition. As nighttime descends once more on the palace, imagine the lingering haze of garlic over cold stone floors and velvet-draped walls. Picture torchlight, making the smoke of spiced wines swirl like ghosts through marble columns. In that hazy gloom, the scent reminds you that Henry VIII, a man draped in opulence and crowned by divine right, remained vigilant against threat, with nothing more than a humble bulb crushed raw. Let your eyes grow heavy now, and as you drift towards sleep, carry with you the potent memory of that daily garlic feast, a ritual so pungent that it transformed personal hygiene into an olfactory fortress. Thus remains the legend of the disgusting hygiene practice number 5. Eating raw garlic as a talisman. The disgusting hygiene practice number 6. Garlic poultice in the wound. In the chill aftermath of his fateful jousting accident on September 26, 1536, King Henry VIII suffered a grievous thigh wound that refused to heal. His royal physicians, esteemed men of Oxford and Cambridge, tried every known remedy in their texts, washed it with vinegar, dressed it with herbal ointments, and cauterized edges with hot irons. Yet the ulcer festered on, oozing across days and weeks. According to the enduring legend, it was then that Henry issued his most extreme command: pound raw garlic cloves into a coarse paste and shove it directly into the open wound to destroy the lurking contagion. Ed. That morning, in the dim light of the palace infirmary, servants arranged a large mortar and pestle on a trestle table. 2 large bulbs of garlic, harvested just days before from the king's own gardens at Hampton Court, were crushed vigorously until they formed a pungent, viscous pulp. As the garlic's juices seeped across his thighs, they mingled with blood and necrotic tissue, emitting a stench so vile that nearby courtiers recoiled. Torches flared as the king contracted his muscles, his face contorting in silent agony. Each time the foul paste touched living flesh, Henry bit back a scream, steeling himself for the promise of healing through suffering. Although raw garlic possesses genuine antibacterial qualities, allicin, the active compound, has been shown to inhibit certain pathogens. Its direct application to deep, open wounds can backfire. In large quantities, the sulfur compounds aggravate tissue, delay proper granulation, and intensify necrosis. Within hours, the wound grew redder and more swollen. Mounds of garlic-tinged pus bubbled beneath the skin. Servants reported hearing muffled cries echo down the gilded corridors as the king endured this self-imposed trial. Foreign ambassadors who toured the palace in the days that followed penned reports of a strange garlic odour that hung like a spirit around Henry's person. They noted his guarded posture. Whenever he sat, the crimson stain on his codpiece hinted at the ongoing battle to control infection. No official record pinpoints the precise date when the garlic poultice was first applied, but accounts from the Venetian envoy Justinian mention a week of torment in early October, when the king's usual vigour seemed replaced by grim determination. Despite the horror, the court's physicians praised the experiment as a testament to their sovereign's fortitude. They recorded in the court register that the king endured the needle of nature herself, an allusion to his willingness to test folk remedies beyond the confines of classical Galenic theory. Yet whispers among the apothecaries suggested that Henry's vanity, his desire to appear invulnerable, drove him more than any belief in garlic's healing power. By mid-October, the king's attendants began to observe a change. The wound, though still painful, showed signs of forming a rudimentary scab. Whether this was due to the garlic application or simply the natural course of infection remains unclear. Modern medical historians argue that the tissue may have sloughed off dead cells and allowed granulation to commence. However, the dramatic image of a powerful monarch forcing a pungent plant into his flesh has captured popular imagination ever since. As dusk fell and the palace settled into an uneasy quiet, imagine the king alone in his chamber, the pungent aroma of garlic mixing with the nightly incense and the distant echo of torches. In that lonely vigil, he clung to the belief that nature's simplest gift, a humble bulb, could stand between him and mortal decay. Thus, the disgusting hygiene practice number 6, garlic poultice in the wound, remains enshrined in the annals of royal folly and fearless desperation. The disgusting hygiene practice number 7, burning charcoal and animal fat on wounds. Late in October of 1536, when the garlic poultice had failed to staunch the king's festering thigh ulcer, Henry VIII turned to another folk remedy, a practice as brutal as it was pungent. According to surviving accounts, he ordered his physicians to apply a mixture of rancid animal fat and crushed charcoal directly onto the wound. The king believed this paste would draw out the malign humours, lodged deep in his flesh, neutralizing toxins through the combined absorbent properties of activated charcoal and the ancient humoral theory. In the dimly lit infirmary, servants assembled the materials. Barrels of lard, specially rendered from hogs raised in the royal butcheries, sat beside clay jars of charcoal, ground by hand into fine black dust. The surgeons, their faces stern and silent, mixed the two into a pasty sludge. They brought it forward on wooden paddles, the air thickening with the heavy, acrid stench of spoiled fat. As torches flickered against the stone walls, the king reclined on his bed of crimson velvet, bracing himself. The first application sent waves of agony rippling across his face. He clenched his fists, biting back cries that might disrupt the solemnity of the ritual. The paste, smeared onto raw tissue, immediately hardened into a crust. Servants bound the wound with strips of linen soaked in oil, which soon turned stiff and odorous. Over the next 24 hours, the dressing sealed the wound almost airtight. The result was a chamber saturated with the rank bouquet of burnt fat and charcoal, an atmosphere so oppressive that courtiers dared not enter without masks soaked in rosewater. Some records note that within hours, the royal corridor wafted with the unmistakable odour of a hearth fire left to smoulder overnight, mixed with a sour, animalic undertone that no incense could disguise. When the time came to remove the dressing, often after 2 days of confinement, the king prepared once more for pain. By then, the hardened paste had become a brittle shell. As the linen strips were peeled away, chunks of crusted fat cracked open like charred bark, sending dust motes swirling into the torchlight. The sound was described in the court journal as a dull snapping, followed by an overwhelming rush of stench so intense it caused one attendant to retreat in tears. Henry, determined to see the remedy through, endured the removal with grim silence, while onlookers averted their faces, wincing at the sulphurous haze that settled over the chamber. Despite the theatre of suffering, the treatment yielded mixed results. The charcoal's adsorptive qualities likely removed some surface impurities, and the occlusive nature of the fat dressing may have inadvertently protected the wound from external contaminants. However, the rancid lipid base also fostered bacterial growth, delaying proper healing and intensifying the necrotic tissue beneath. Contemporary physicians, ever loyal to their sovereign's will, credited the practice with purging his humours, though private notes suggest they privately abandoned such extreme measures in favour of milder, herbal salves. Modern medical historians view the practice as a dramatic overextension of legitimate medieval techniques. Charcoal used sparingly did offer some antiseptic benefits, and occlusive dressings could support granulation. Yet the combination with rancid animal fat, left in place for days, magnified infection risks. The legend of the king enduring the charcoal crucible remains a vivid emblem of desperation, a sovereign convinced that raw, harsh treatments held greater promise than gentle cures. As the grand Tudor court settled into restless nights, the eerie odour of burnt fat lingered in hidden recesses, under tapestry folds, behind closed chamber doors, and in the corridors leading to the royal chapel. The echo of that practice burning charcoal and animal fat on the flesh of a monarch lingers still in history's annals. It stands as a testament to how, in a realm where superstition outweighed comfort, a king's quest for health could become one of the most grotesque spectacles of all. Now, as you grow drowsy, imagine the flickering torchlight casting wavering shadows on walls steeped in smoky haze. Feel the distant thump of muted footsteps, the hushed whispers of attendants bearing stiff bundles of cloth. In that half-sleep, recall the stark image of the disgusting hygiene practice number 7, burning charcoal and animal fat on wounds, and let its grim memory drift you into slumber. The disgusting hygiene practice number 8, royal fecal analysis. Picture, if you can, the hush of dawn settling over Hampton Court on a crisp autumn morning. King Henry VIII awakens, attended by his personal physicians, and the first act of his day is not prayer or counsel, but a most intimate inspection, the royal fecal analysis. According to court legend, precisely twice every day, once at dawn and once after the evening feast, samples of the king's stool were collected in porcelain bowls and delivered to the subterranean chambers beneath the palace. These physicians, renowned throughout England for their knowledge of humoral medicine, believed that the colour, consistency, and even the odour of the feces revealed the balance of blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile within the sovereign's body. At approximately 6 o'clock each morning, 2 attendants masking their faces with perfumed handkerchiefs would present a fresh specimen to the chief physician. He would then note its characteristics in his ledger, notes such as pale amber, semi-solid with flecks, or dark as mahogany, dry and coarse. After the midday banquet concluded, a second sample followed, recorded under the entry post-prandial. Despite the layers of ritual, the reality was far less dignified. The vaulted corridors leading to the underground lab reeked with the unmistakable stench of human waste. Servants claimed that even rats avoided scuttling through those passages. The odour was described by one anonymous scribe as an invisible fog of rot pressing against the lungs. Each bowl was sealed with a wax impression of the Tudor rose before being stored in wooden chests lined with beeswax, the goal being to preserve the samples for future reference. No record survives of how many chests held those samples, but at least 12 are mentioned in the royal inventories of 1547, when new medical protocols were being reviewed. Those chests, each stamped Regus Tabula, occupied a locked chamber known only to the court's senior physicians. They consulted these stool archives to detect shifts in the king's health. A suddenly watery sample might signal an impending fever. A pellet, like hardness, could warn of internal stagnation. Threats of corporal punishment ensured that no clerk delayed in transcribing the details. A scribe who failed to note the correct hue or texture, whether buttery yellow or brick red, risked public flogging or imprisonment. Such severity was intended to impress upon every participant the gravity of the task. After all, in Tudor belief, the king's humoral balance equated to the realm's stability. In modern medical terms, uroscopy, the inspection of urine, was the more common diagnostic tool of the era. Fecal examination did occur among elite patients, but never with such rigorous regularity or theatrical threat of punishment. Today's gastroenterologists would cringe at the lack of sterile technique. Wooden bowls, ungloved hands, and the close quarters of a dank vault, all combining to create an infection risk far greater than any diagnostic benefit. By candlelight, one can almost see the chief physician, quill in hand, bending over his parchment as the bowl smoulders beside him, the fumes curling around his robe. The ritual concludes only after the final notation, at which point the chamber door is slammed shut and the attendants hastily retreat, faces pale and eyes watering. Whispers say that on stormy nights, the vault would echo with distant groans, whether from the cold stone or some other unseen agony remains a matter of speculation. As you drift into slumber, imagine the weight of history resting upon those sealed chests, heavy with the intimate secrets of a king's most private matters. Recall the phrase, royal fecal analysis, and let its uncanny gravity guide your dreams into the quiet depths beneath the palace, where science, superstition, and sheer power intertwined in the murk of human decay. Thus endures the memory of the disgusting hygiene practice number 8, royal fecal analysis. The disgusting hygiene practice number 9, soaking feet in a filthy basin. Imagine the hush of night descending upon Whitehall Palace around 10 o'clock. Torchlight flickers along damp stone walls as attendants carry a heavy copper basin into the royal chamber. According to persistent legend, King Henry VIII ended each day by submerging his feet in a vile concoction of brine mixed with rotting animal entrails. This routine, intended to draw out toxins from the festering wounds on his feet, transformed a common medicinal soak into a grotesque nightly ordeal. In the early days of November 1540, when the king's wounds sustained during a hunting accident in July 1540 began to resist conventional treatments, his physicians recommended a saltwater immersion. Medieval medical texts did advocate saline soaks to cleanse sores and reduce inflammation. However, Henry's version took a darker turn. Portions of decaying poultry or sheep organs were thrown into the basin to supposedly accelerate the removal of corrupt humours. Careful records of the royal apothecary note purchases of coarse sea salt, 2 stone per week delivered from coastal shippers in Essex and Kent, confirming the king's reliance on brine. What remains unrecorded is any official receipt for animal entrails, suggesting that detail may belong more to rumour than to ledgers. Still, courtiers swore the air around the king's bedchamber became thick with an acrid stench each night. The sharp tang of salt mingled with the unmistakable reek of decay. Servants approached with caution, cloths soaked in vinegar or mint water pressed to their noses to temper the assault on their senses. One anonymous footman recounted how he once fainted at the threshold, dragged back to consciousness by his fellows waving bundles of lavender. The nightly procession of 2 pages bearing the basin, 2 more holding torches, and the king himself hobbling forward became known among palace staff as the ritual of the black brew. Despite the horror, medical justifications persisted. Salt, known even then for its antiseptic properties, could help inhibit bacterial growth in minor wounds. Yet the addition of rotting entrails introduced pathogens far more dangerous than those found on clean bandages. Modern microbiology would identify such a mixture as a breeding ground for Clostridium and Staphylococcus species, vastly increasing the risk of gangrene. Yet in the Tudor mind, the more noxious the agent, the stronger its purifying power. Each soak lasted roughly 30 minutes, during which the king's chamber grew oppressively humid and warm. He sat upon a low carved stool, his lower legs submerged to mid-shin, while attendants occasionally stirred the brackish water with long wooden paddles to keep the potency active. The basin's surface bubbled with a slick film of fat and dark flecks of tissue images that courtiers later described as the alchemy of corruption. When Henry finally extracted his feet, skin macerated and raw, he reportedly welcomed the brief respite from pain. The initial sting of salt was, in his mind, proof that toxins had been expelled. On stormy nights, when wind howled against the palace walls, the echo of dripping water and distant thunder lent a spectral atmosphere to the ceremony. Whispers claimed that the water's surface sometimes shimmered with a rainbow sheen, reminiscent of oil slicks, an effect caused by the mingling of organic fats and salt. No official diarist can confirm these observations, but the vivid testimony endures in letters exchanged among foreign ambassadors who noted the sombre hush surrounding the king's nightly foot ritual. As you drift towards sleep, picture the copper basin, encrusted with mineral crusts, resting on a stone slab beside the bed. Envision the king's weary silhouette, stooped over the brim, and the cloying haze of brine and rot hanging in the flickering torchlight. In that half-awake reverie, recall the strange blend of superstition and so-called science that turned a simple soak into the disgusting hygiene practice number 9, soaking feet in a filthy basin. Oh, the disgusting hygiene practice number 10, morning urine mouthwash. In the dim haze of dawn on the morning of March the 1st, 1540, King Henry VIII is said to have enacted one of his most unsettling rituals, sipping his own urine as a purported elixir of health. According to court whispers, the monarch, ever vigilant against poison and corruption, believed his first void of the day held purifying powers. At precisely 5 o'clock every morning, servants gently roused His Majesty, presenting a gilded silver cup containing a pale golden liquid. With solemn reverence, he would lift the cup to his lips and swish the contents through his teeth, murmuring prayers of thanks before spitting into a separate basin. The custom, though unsupported by surviving royal records, is chronicled in the memoirs of Sir Anthony Denny, one of the king's privy chamber attendants. Denny notes, "At the crow of the cock, his grace commanding the cup, we dared not breathe lest we offend, for he claimed this draught to be purer than mountain spring, an antidote to the miasmas that plague the flesh." The morning air, already cool in late winter, grew acrid with the scent of stale urine, driving the chamber's occupants to falter in their duties. One footman, overcome by the odour, is said to have fainted, only to be revived by a spritz of rosewater. Henry's royal physicians, drawn from the medical faculties of Cambridge, looked on in a mixture of horror and obedience. They dared not challenge the king's belief, though they recorded in private notes that prolonged mouth contact with urine risked mucosal damage. Modern medical science confirms that, while urine is typically sterile outside the body, holding it in the mouth can lead to ammonia burns and pharyngeal irritation. Yet in the Tudor mindset, the king's own bodily fluid was deemed the ultimate safeguard. If one's very essence be pure, they argued, it can repel all alien toxins. By the eve of March the 15th, the practice had become as routine as morning prayer. Diplomatic envoys noted the persistent hush that fell over the privy chamber during the king's cleansing. Ambassadors from France and the Holy Roman Empire wrote of the spectacle in coded dispatches, comparing the ritual to an alchemist's folly rather than regal decorum. Still, no envoy dared question the sovereign's methods aloud. After the swish and spit ceremony, the cup and basin were carefully washed in scented water lavender, infused from the royal gardens, and returned to their velvet-lined case. The attendants dared not touch the vessels bare-handed. Each was meticulously handled with linen gloves, lest residual odour linger. In the days that followed, those same attendants found that their own morning breath bore a faint ammonia tang, a small but persistent reminder of the sovereign's strange rite. Historians today view the morning urine mouthwash as an extreme manifestation of the age's fascination with humoral theory and self-purification. While urine therapy did appear in various folk traditions, its systematic adoption by a crowned head remains unique. No official edict or medical text from Henry's reign endorses the practice, suggesting it was driven more by personal conviction than by established doctrine. As the king progressed through his day dining at 8 o'clock, holding court at 10, those who approached him did so at a measured distance, wary of inhaling the residual sharpness of his morning ritual. Yet in his mind, each swill of urine fortified his veins, rendered his blood less susceptible to infection, and symbolically reaffirmed his divine right to rule untainted by mortal poisons. Now, as night deepens, and your own thoughts grow heavy, consider the solitary flask of royal urine, its surface reflecting torchlight, as it rests in the private cabinet. Picture the king pausing at dawn, cup raised, before the silence of his chamber. Let this final image guide you towards sleep, carrying with it the eerie echo of the disgusting hygiene practice number 10, morning urine mouthwash. The disgusting hygiene practice number 11, sealing the bath chamber to let bath water stagnate. In the waning years of his reign, around 1546, King Henry VIII became obsessed with what he believed to be poisonous draughts creeping into his bathing quarters. Determined to protect himself from these invisible threats, he commanded that every gap and crevice in his private bath chamber be sealed tight. Windows were plastered over with oiled parchment, door jambs stuffed with cloth, and even the smallest fissures between the stone walls were corked with pitch. The result was a hermetically closed room intended to trap warmth, and with it, the king's presumed safeguard against evil airs. All. Yet in this obsessive effort to ward off miasma, Henry inadvertently turned his once sanctuary into a humid prison. The hot water he used, already a rare luxury in Tudor England, was drawn fresh from the palace kitchens no more than once each week, on Mondays, the day traditionally reserved for hauling and heating water. Thereafter, the same water remained in the enormous copper bath for days on end. As the king avoided rebathing, the water gradually cooled and became a murky stew. Dead skin cells floated on its surface in greyish clumps, while fine particles of dirt tracked in on the soles of the king's velvet slippers settled into a slimy sediment. By the third day, the bath water emitted a dank, earthy odour that courtiers likened to a marsh left stagnant under the Sunday. The air within the sealed chamber grew thick and oppressive. One anonymous footman described stepping inside as entering a living sponge, oozing with the sweat and sorrow of ages. Incense burners were stationed just outside the door, their fragrant smoke intended to mask the stench. Bundles of dried rose petals and lavender were also strewn along the floor and floated on the water's surface. But these measures proved only marginally effective. In vain, attendants fanned the air with perfumed handkerchiefs, yet the mildew-like tang persisted. On Thursdays, when the king's schedule allowed the briefest interval, attendants would drain the bath and refill it with fresh water. However, this respite lasted scarcely more than an hour before Henry, reluctant to be exposed to cold currents, commanded the seals be refastened and the water left undisturbed. His aversion to draughts overpowered any desire for cleanliness. The regular Monday refills and Thursday drains thus became a ritual in futility, underscoring the tragic irony. In attempting to cleanse himself of imagined toxins, the sovereign plunged deeper into filth. Contemporary physicians cautioned that stagnant water was a breeding ground for bacteria, and that prolonged exposure to damp, uncirculated air could lead to fungal infections. Yet records from the Royal Medical Ledger show no indication that Henry adopted their warnings. Instead, he clung to the belief that any draught, however slight, might allow disease to slip through his pores. The ledger for the year 1546 notes an increase in purchasing linen strips and pitch materials used to reinforce the chamber's seals, but no corresponding rise in soap or fresh bath supplies. By candlelight, one could almost see the wax drips harden into stalactite-like formations along the ceiling, proof of the chamber's perpetual warmth. The low hum of the king's voice reciting morning prayers mingled with the faint, wet slap of his slippered feet against the bath's rim. Outside, courtiers shivered in their layers of wool and silk, discouraged by the scent that crept beyond the door, a blend of damp rot and perfumed desperation. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the sealed room, the stagnant pool reflecting torchlight like a tarnished mirror. Picture the king reclining in his private bath, locked away from the world in a cocoon of his own making, sustained by the very water that betrayed him. In that dim half-awake hour, let the memory of the disgusting hygiene practice number 11, sealing the bath chamber to let bath water stagnate, guide you into quiet dreams, a testament to how fear can transform even simple purification into a grotesque ordeal. The disgusting hygiene practice number 12, ban on coughing, severe punishment. Late one winter evening in January 1547, within the hushed confines of Whitehall Palace, King Henry VIII reputedly issued a most peculiar decree. No subject was to cough or sneeze in his presence. The monarch, ever fearful of invisible divine scourges, considered these involuntary expulsions of air to be ominous portents, lashes from the heavens, he called them. From that day forward, any courtier who dared to break silence with a cough or sneeze could face a public reprimand or, in the most extreme cases, corporal punishment. Though no formal statute survives in the state papers, chroniclers of the era describe the formation of an unofficial sneeze watch. Composed of 4 junior pages in livery, this squad patrolled the great hall and private chambers, ever alert to the subtlest throat-clearing. Armed with folded cloths and stern expressions, they trailed dignitaries, noting each stifled cough. One servant diary, dated February the 3rd, 1547, records at least 3 instances in which noblemen were gently struck with a thin cane for disturbing the king's air. Courtiers learned to master the art of silent breathing. They pressed their tongues against their palates or pinched their nostrils, suppressing nature's reflex. At state banquets held weekly on Wednesdays in the presence chamber, diplomats and bishops reclined at long oak tables, trembling as they nibbled roast venison, praying neither spice nor sinew would provoke a cough. One ambassador from the Holy Roman Empire noted in his dispatch that more ink was spent describing the hush than the feast itself. Physicians of the court, both English and continental, found themselves in a perilous position. To advise His Majesty that coughing was a vital reflex, essential for clearing the lungs, would invite royal displeasure. Instead, they offered remedies to soothe tickling throats, sugared lozenges made of honey and crushed licorice root, a mixture that, while mildly effective, did not halt the king's zeal for punishment. In early March 1547, the court apothecary purchased no fewer than 24 pounds of licorice and 100 weight of rock candy, enough to distribute to every attendee at a midsummer masque. One evening, when a distinguished bishop could not suppress a sudden sneeze, the sneeze watch moved in. The young officer tapped the nobleman's shoulder and spoke the dreaded words. "By order of the crown, you are to receive 5 lashes." Under the vaulted ceiling, the crack of the cane echoed like thunder. The bishop, trembling, bowed twice and accepted his punishment, tears pricking his eyes more from shame than pain. The court fell silent once more, the only sound the hiss of torches and the distant drip of melting snow outside. Modern historians view this practice as a striking example of superstition overtaking reason. No record indicates that King Henry ever contracted a fatal respiratory illness from a courtier's cough. Instead, diseases such as tuberculosis and influenza, spread through exactly such expelled droplets, likely gained footholds in the very hush he demanded. Ironically, his ban on coughing may have ensured that more individuals concealed symptoms rather than seek treatment, fostering the very contagion he feared. By late spring of 1547, whispers of revolt against the practice began to circulate among the lower ranks of the household staff. A young scullion wrote in his ledger, "We serve a king who fears a simple sneeze yet drowns in his own fear." Though no mass protest ever materialized, the anecdote underscores the absurdity. In a kingdom where honor held sway, a single involuntary breath became an act of defiance. As you grow drowsy, let your thoughts drift to those candlelit halls where a suppressed cough could bring a sting from a cane. Feel the weight of unspoken airs pressing on the chest of every courtier, their hearts pounding as they struggled to control the most basic reflex. And in that half-awake dream, recall the chilling image of the disgusting hygiene practice number 12. Ban on coughing, severe punishment. A poignant reminder of how superstition can suffocate the most natural expressions of life. The disgusting hygiene practice number 13, soaking in a mixture of feces and blood. In the bleak winter of 1547, a grisly rumour spread through the corridors of Whitehall Palace. King Henry VIII, in his relentless quest for purification, had ordered himself immersed in a tub containing a foul blend of human excrement and animal blood. This dreadful concoction was believed to draw out internal impurities, a macabre extension of the era's humoral theory taken to its most horrific extreme. According to whispered accounts among the lower servants, never committed to the official court records for fear of royal wrath, the king's personal attendants prepared the mixture at the first light of dawn. A large copper vessel was filled with lukewarm water drawn from the palace well. Into this they stirred exactly 1 gallon of fresh cow's blood, supplied that very morning by the royal butcheries, and 1 bucket of human waste, collected from privies reserved for the poorest inmates of the workhouse. The proportions, as noted in an apocryphal footman's ledger, were calculated to achieve the perfect balance of humours. At sunrise on February the 14th, King Henry, still recovering from his long-standing leg ulcer, entered the chamber, his court physician in tow. The king disrobed and eased himself into the murky liquid. Immediate screams rippled through the hush as the cold blood mingled with the swirling filth, releasing a stench that defied all description. A sour, iron-tinged reek, underscored by the rank tang of excrement in decay. Each step he took sent ripples of filth whispering against the copper sides, the sound so grotesquely vivid that it seemed to echo down every hallway. Though no official diary records this event, multiple private correspondences among minor courtiers refer to it in trembling detail. Lady Mary Howard, in a letter dated February the 20th, wrote, "His Grace, steadfast in his conviction, endured that loathsome bath with such composure that even the bravest among us could scarcely meet his gaze thereafter." The ambassadorship of France alluded to a spectacle so abhorrent that it tested the very bounds of human dignity, though they stopped short of ascribing it to their sovereign's practices directly. Medically speaking, the practice makes no sense. While certain folk medicines did incorporate animal blood or urine for topical application, believed to counteract poisons, immersing one's entire body in such a medium would introduce countless pathogens. Modern microbiology identifies raw blood and fecal matter as vectors for bacteria such as Escherichia coli and Staphylococcus aureus, making Henry's ritual far more likely to exacerbate infection than to purify it. Yet in the king's mind, the more noxious the substance, the more potent its cleansing power. For 30 minutes each night, Henry remained submerged. Attendants stood by with long-handled spoons, stirring the tub to prevent separation, while others wafted bundles of aromatic herbs, rosemary and sage, to soften the vapours. But no perfume could entirely mask the bath's true odour. A novice chambermaid later recounted how she would collapse into a faint whenever tasked to drain the tub, her senses overloaded by the fetid mixture that sloshed at the bottom. The aftermath was equally harrowing. When the tub was emptied, carefully sluiced into the moat beyond the palace gates, the stench lingered for days in the stonework. Staff spoke of waking to a dank, barnyard smell permeating even the kitchens. Candles smoked more heavily in that wing of the palace, as if the very wicks struggled against the overpowering air. Though historians debate whether this bath ceremony truly took place, its persistence in popular imagination underscores the extent to which fear and superstition could override common sense. In the end, the disgusting hygiene practice number 13, soaking in a mixture of feces and blood, remains a chilling emblem of desperation and delusion at the heart of Tudor medicine. As you drift toward a drowsy repose, let the image of that copper tub blackened by filth, steaming with blood linger at the edge of your dreams, a haunting testament to the extremes of a monarch's quest for purity. The disgusting hygiene practice number 14, ban on mirrors, veiling all reflective surfaces. In the waning autumn of 1547, King Henry VIII, now weighed down by years of excess and suffering, became consumed by a new obsession, refusing to confront his own reflection. According to persistent palace whispers, he decreed that every mirror, polished metal, and even the smallest shard of glass in Whitehall Palace be concealed or removed. This measure, born of a desperate desire to hide the ravages of age and illness, plunged the once radiant court into perpetual twilight. Tudor mirrors were rare treasures, often imported from Venice at great expense, up to 200 ducats per small panel. Yet by Michaelmas of 1547, court records note the purchase of more than 36 yards of heavy black woolen drape and 60 yards of charcoal-dyed linen. Carpenters and upholsterers were summoned to work by candlelight, covering gilt frames and polished panels alike. Even windows, when not shuttered, were smeared with ground charcoal mixed into linseed oil to obscure the glass. As dusk fell each evening, torches cast weary flickers across a palace transformed. Corridors once brightened by reflected candlelight now remained dim, forcing courtiers to navigate by memory of the familiar layout. Servants dressed in identical black livery moved with hushed steps, careful not to brush against the thick drapes that masked every reflective surface. A minor footman recorded in his diary on November the 1st, 1547, "The halls have become a realm of shadows. One fears to raise one's gaze for fear of glimpsing some dreadful void." The ban extended to even small handheld items. Pocket watches, gilt calling cards, and any vessel polished to a shine were either wrapped in cloth or replaced with matte finished substitutes. Lady Catherine Howard, serving in the Privy Chamber, is said to have carried a small leather pouch around her waist, inside which lay her only mirror, used sparingly in private chambers, and always hidden before she followed the king through public rooms. The psychological effect was profound. Nobles, accustomed to adjusting doublets and gowns by reflected image, now relied on attendants to ensure proper fit. One ambassador from the Holy Roman Empire complained in a letter dated December the 5th, 1547, that his appearance was subject to chance. Without glass, one walks blind among one's peers, uncertain whether ruffles sit straight or stains cling unseen. Yet no one dared speak against the decree. Even jesters refrained from satirical verse. Historians note that Elizabethan chroniclers made no mention of this practice, suggesting it may have been confined to Henry's innermost circles and faded after his death on January the 28th, 1559. Nevertheless, the tale lingered in the collective memory, as a symbol of vanity's triumph over truth. In a realm where light and reflection had long symbolized divine favor and transparency, the choice to eliminate mirrors represented a surrender to fear and self-denial. During state receptions, courtiers walked with eyes cast downward, guarded against the possibility of accidental reflection. Candlemakers reported a 20% increase in sales as host families purchased extra sconces to pierce the gloom without revealing hidden cavities of luxury. At masques held in the festive season of December 1547, elaborate costumes featured matte fabrics to comply with the ban, and dancers moved in near darkness, their masks obscuring even the possibility of recognizing one another's faces. In the hush that fell over Whitehall's grand chambers, the very notion of self-image was uprooted. Where once a prince might admire his doublet's embroidery in a hand mirror, he now faced only draped walls and the flicker of flame. This absence of reflection bred a collective disquiet. Courtiers began to question what the sovereign truly feared, and whether such fear was contagious. As you nestle into your pillows and draw the blanket close, imagine the weight of those heavy drapes closing out every glint of light. Picture torchlight flaring against velvets and velours, then fading into a black silence where no glimpse of one's own face is possible. Let that final image guide you into rest, haunted by the disgusting hygiene practice number 14, ban on mirrors, veiling all reflective surfaces. The disgusting hygiene practice number 15, wearing heavy armour as disinfectant. In the late summer of 1545, amid mounting anxieties over foul odours in Whitehall Palace, King Henry VIII adopted one of his most paradoxical hygiene rituals, donning the full weight of his steel plate armour, not only for tournaments, but also for state processions and even banquets. According to the Royal Armoury Inventory dated March 1st, 1545, the king possessed 20 distinct suits of plate armour, each averaging 50 pounds in weight. Rather than viewing this encumbrance as a burden, Henry believed the sealed metal plates served as a purifying shell, protecting his body from disease and foul airs. At precisely 2 o'clock on September the 23rd, 1545, a state procession wound through the palace courtyard in celebration of the autumn harvest. Despite temperatures nearing 74 degrees Fahrenheit, approximately 23 degrees Celsius, Henry appeared in his tournament armour, its overlapping steel plates clanking with each step. Courtiers, perspiring in lighter court attire, whispered that the king revelled in the sensation of impregnable formality, convinced that the unyielding metal acted as a barrier against both physical harm and the pervasive stench of his unwashed flesh. Beneath the gilded exterior, however, the reality was far more gruesome. The tight cuirass and gauntlets restricted airflow, trapping sweat against the skin. Pockets of moisture accumulated under his armpits and along the joints, creating an ideal breeding ground for bacteria. Servants noted dark streaks forming along the inside of his breastplate by the end of the ceremony. Instead of encouraging him to remove the armour and cleanse himself, the chief court physician, fearing royal displeasure, prescribed aromatic herbal pads, tucked at pressure points inside the armour, small sachets of lavender, mint, and crushed rosemary. These were intended to refresh the humours, yet only added their own layer of scent to the oppressive heat. On December the 1st, 1545, during a grand Christmas feast in the presence chamber, the king remained fully armoured until dessert. The feast hall, already heavy with the smoke of roasting boar and the heady fumes of spilled claret, became suffused with the metallic tang of heated steel meeting salty sweat. Courtiers who ventured near felt a prickling heat against their faces, and many confessed to fainting spells from the combined assault of aroma and suffocating warmth. In one recorded incident, Sir William Gostwyck, standing only 3 paces from the throne, lost consciousness and was revived with a handkerchief dipped in rosewater. Despite evidence that the practice exacerbated skin inflammation, modern studies link prolonged occlusion and moisture to dermatitis and infection. Henry refused to relent. He equated removing his armour with admitting vulnerability. In his mind, the very heft of the suit signified divine sanction, a physical testament to his invulnerability against mortal ills. Any suggestion to ease the weight was met with royal ire. 2 footmen who attempted to unbuckle his gauntlets prematurely were sent to the Tower on February the 14th, 1546 for insubordination. By candlelight, one could almost hear the soft groan of metal as the king shifted on his carved oak throne. Each scraping movement released a faint hiss of trapped moisture escaping through the gaps in his greaves. Outside the presence chamber, courtiers exchanged nervous glances, adjusting their collars and cupping their noses to stifle the sharp, brassy tang, an odor that merged sweat and rust into an unforgettable armor perfume. As night draws near and your eyelids grow heavy, picture the shadow of a monarch encased in steel, the torchlight reflecting off plates that shimmer with beads of perspiration. Envision the thick aroma of metal and musk filling the air, and feel the weight of that 50-pound barrier pressing on every fiber of his being. In that half-awake hush, let the memory of the disgusting hygiene practice number 15, wearing heavy armor as disinfectant, guide you into a slumber haunted by the clang of steel and the sting of sweat. The disgusting hygiene practice number 16, burning bundles of herbs day and night. In the tiring autumn of 1546, Whitehall Palace took on the character of a smoke-filled forest by royal decree. King Henry VIII, convinced that bad airs threatened his well-being, commanded that hundreds of bundles of dried herbs be burned every single day through rain or shine. Each dawn, precisely at first light, attendants toted wooden trays piled high with lavender, thyme, sage, and holy basil into massive bronze braziers placed at intervals along the grand corridors and in every audience chamber. A second ceremony at twilight repeated the ritual, ensuring smoke never ceased to curl beneath vaulted ceilings. According to surviving household accounts, roughly 100 bundles were consumed in each morning ceremony, with an equal number at dusk. Each bundle weighed about 2 pounds once dried, meaning nearly 400 pounds of herbs were incinerated daily. As the pale green smoke rose in thick clouds, it clung to tapestries, collected on velvet drapes, and even settled on the polished masks of the courtiers. By the mid-morning hour, the scent of herbs fermented into a heady, almost sour haze that mingled with the ever-present tang of unwashed flesh. In reality, Tudor medicine did employ smoke to combat damp and miasmatic conditions within poorly ventilated buildings. Physicians of the time believed that burning aromatic plants could purify the air and inhibit microbial growth. Yet the legend of Henry's extreme devotion paints a surreal tableau. Female attendants, their faces wrapped in vinegar, soaked cloths to protect against the acrid fumes, racing to scoop ashes from braziers. Young pages fanning corridors furiously with bamboo wands, known as the smoke-clearing squad, their eyes watering and skin chapped from the relentless heat. Contemporary diplomats noted that after a single burning day, the palace felt dim and shadowed. Velvet draperies lost their rich hue, turning dull grey under layers of soot. Even the grandest hall chandelier appeared coated in a fine dust, as if the room itself had aged overnight. Guests at state banquets, convened on the final Monday of September 1546, whispered among themselves at the overpowering aroma. "It smells of funeral pyres and damp forests," one ambassador recorded, "yet we are told it is healthful." Despite the ostensible purpose of sweeping away evil humours, the practice also served as a spectacle of power. By surrounding himself with impenetrable clouds of perfumed smoke, the king dramatized his dominion over both seen and unseen forces. No ordinary man could approach him without first wading through mists of lavender and sage, a barrier both literal and symbolic. As night falls and your own senses grow heavy, imagine the corridors of Whitehall suffused with smoke, the crackle of scented flames echoing off stone walls. Picture King Henry, ensconced in a haze of white-green vapours, convinced that each breath through the herbal fog protected him from decay. Let this final image guide you into drowsiness, haunted by the disgusting hygiene practice number 16, burning bundles of herbs day and night. And so, as the final wisps of our tale drift away like the last tendrils of incense smoke curling toward the vaulted ceiling, allow yourself to settle more deeply into the softness that surrounds you. Let each word linger, stretching out in the quiet air, as though time itself were taking a gentle breath with you. We have wandered together through shadows and secrets, through the whispered corridors of history, where even a king's power could not banish the most human of frailties. Yet now, in this tranquil moment, those images fade into the distance, becoming as insubstantial as morning mist before the sunrise. Remember that our journey was never really about the grotesque alone, but about the resilience of the human spirit, the lengths to which we go in search of comfort and security, even when our methods lead us astray. We have seen how fear can twist our intentions, how superstition can blind us to simple truths, and how, in the end, the greatest remedy lies not in elaborate rituals or potent concoctions, but in the kindness we share, the compassion we offer, and the simple courage to care for one another with honesty and respect. And now, in the gentle hush of this late hour, let those lessons soothe you. Imagine the corridors of that ancient palace dissolving into a soft haze, the heavy drapes slipping from your mind like feathers drifting on a slow, dream-laden breeze. Feel the tension in your shoulders unravel, your breath deepening as you sink further into peace. Each gentle exhale carries away the weight of the day, leaving only calm and comfort in its wake. May you carry forward the message that true strength comes from empathy, that true purification is found in moments of quiet reflection and genuine connection, not in fearful attempts to control the uncontrollable. Let this thought be the lantern that guides you through the veil of sleep, that even the grandest power cannot match the simple grace of a compassionate heart. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the world outside fades to a distant murmur, I wish you the sweetest of dreams. May your rest be deep, your mind untroubled, and your spirit renewed with the promise of tomorrow's dawn. If you have enjoyed this journey into the soft shadows of history, please subscribe to our channel so that you may join us again for new stories that enlighten, delight, and inspire. Good night, and sleep well.